Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. There's a few more that are coming on board as I'm speaking. But welcome again, and Michael Irwin here from not so sunny Melbourne, a bit cool this morning. And what we're looking at today is about leadership and AI. What are the three key critical skills that leaders must have in an AI world as we're moving forward? And for most people that I've spoken to, this is a little bit of surprise what I'm about to cover today. So let's jump straight into it and get across to the PowerPoint slide and get straight into what we're going to be talking about today. Feel free to jump in with any questions as we're going along, and happy to answer those in the chat, or take yourself off mute and jump in and ask a question as we're going along. So firstly, a little bit about me. I love my sport, love keeping fit. There's a photo there on the right-hand side of one of the fun runs that I've done. On the left-hand side, you see me with my partner and my son with some Collingwood gear on from a few years ago when we were successful. Not going so well so far this year, but hopefully, from my point of view, that we'll get better. And in the middle, you can see just one of the many, many groups that I have facilitated. Welcome to those that are just joining us, along with the others. We've just got started, and a little bit more about me. In the middle, as I said, there's the photo there of which is one of the many groups where I've been the leadership facilitator and helped them with their growth and leadership development. So a little bit more about me and my background. I first became a manager in my late 20s. Okay, I didn't have any training. I was just one of the better performers in the group, so I got promoted to be the manager, which is a story I hear very, very often. And so I worked hard on it. I worked through trial and error, and I thought I was doing really well, working very hard, worked long hours. But it turns out I wasn't doing as well as I thought I was doing. Eventually, I got some leadership training and coaching, and then what I realized that I improved more in less than a year than I had in the previous 7 years. And that made a huge difference. And the interesting thing was that others started to notice and started to ask me about what I was doing differently and to be able to help and coach them. So then I became a full-time leadership coach about 15 years ago when I was looking for a change out of the corporate scene. And since then, I have run leadership training for over 1,500 people, individually coached over 300 managers and still doing so. And I have helped those managers to work less hours and have a more balanced life, but also get promoted and earn more. Okay. And help them to be able to hit their targets and have a motivated team while enabling that balanced life and well-being that they're looking for, which helps to overall increase their job satisfaction. Okay, and maybe some of this can help the same sort of things for you today. So firstly, let's start by giving a picture of how most people are feeling. And again, feel free to type into the chat or jump in and ask any questions or share what's happening for you as we're going along. But here's how the surveys are telling us most managers are feeling right now. They're even less engaged than the average employee. They're feeling the strain of the responsibility of management. Burnout, the number one reason why managers are less engaged. They're worried about the overload, the overwhelm, and burnout. And 70% of managers are experiencing ongoing work stress that they say is overwhelming to them. Now, over 80% of managers also feel like they haven't been set up for success, that their organisation could have done a lot more to set them up for success. And one of the common phrases that I hear is that it feels like I was thrown in the deep end. Okay, so that's not the ideal. And now, on top of that, we've got the uncertainty around so many things in our environment, AI being one of the main things, where there's been staff cuts in many organisations. There's also AI coming into how we're working in our organisations. So there's change projects, or there's kind of some use of AI. What we're seeing clearly in the research is that there's not a lot of clear direction from senior management, and that's only increasing the stress that's being put on middle managers and first-time managers and team leads. So maybe this is some of the things that you're experiencing. Again, let me know if this is what's happening. Okay, thank you. Thank you for some of those messages going through saying, yes, this is the type of thing that's going on for you and that you're experiencing. Okay, and just jump in with any questions, as I've said. So firstly, let's do a check-in and just get a reflection at this stage on how you feel like you're going right at the moment. Okay, and then I can tell you what has also come out of the survey. So firstly, I'd like you to think about how are you performing right now over the last 3-6 months or so. Okay, where 10 out of 10 is you at your best. It's not perfect, it's not some high unachievable standard, it's you performing at your best, like a personal best that an athlete might have, or a tennis player having a really good game, a golf player winning the tournament, as in the Masters just recently. That would be like a 10 out of 10. So just have a think about where are you sitting. And again, let me know, send it through the chat, and just let me know what would your rating be for yourself in a really honest way. Okay. And while people are thinking about that and maybe sending those through, let's reflect on a couple of other questions. How are you feeling about the number of hours that you work per week? So again, if 10 out of 10 was your ideal work balance, right, and 1 out of 10 is you're working way, way, way more hours than you really want to and think you should have to, then where do you sit? Take a moment to think about that. And in just in a minute or two, I'll give you some feedback about what people have been sending through, and I'll also share with you what people have said from previous surveys that I've been through. Now, the other one to think about is, to what extent do you have all of the tools and resources and support you need to be at your best? And this connects back as to whether your organisation is helping you and setting you up for success or setting you up for potentially not being at your best, failure in other words. Okay, so if you have everything you need to be at your best, you would be 10 out of 10. If you've got a few things, you might just be 3 or 4 or 5 out of 10. So where are you at? Okay. So as you're just reflecting and making note on these things, here's what other people have said today and on other days. So most of the people, in terms of how they're going at performing now or over the most recent 6 months or so, rate themselves between 3 and 7, with more people being between 3 and 5 than being higher. So there's a lot of scope for themselves to see that they could be improving in a much higher way, being a higher performer. Okay, and yet also, so that is over 82% of people who have completed the overall surveys through this sort of a discussion or other ways that we've collected the data. And yet 98% of people say that they want to be 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10. Okay, but they're stuck. They're not sure exactly what they need to be able to do to get there. So I encourage you to be thinking about the same thing. How are you going? And can you get to be 8, 9 or 10 out of 10? And in terms of the hours worked per week, again, over 80% of people say that they would prefer to be working less hours. So that is in the 5 to 7 category more often. And having all of the tools and resources to be at my best, the majority of people are under 5 out of 10. They do not feel like they have the tools and resources and support to be at their best. Okay, so there's some interesting things to think about in terms of what you need to be high performing. And today we're specifically going to focus on things in relation to being at your best in connection with what's happening with AI. And again, feel free to jump in and ask any questions. We can also have some questions at the end. All right, so let's look at AI and leadership. So the first thing that we need to think about here is that we want to actually focus on being human and human connection. What I'm hearing from most managers at the moment is, oh, AI is new, it's developing, it's growing. I've got to get to understand. In other words, I'm trying to be an AI expert on top of everything else. Now, what I'm suggesting here and saying that the research is showing us clearly is that AI can perform some important tasks and will be a key part of our future. But the most high-performing leaders are the ones that are going to focus on a few key things, which starts with about the human connection. It's about acknowledging that even with this AI capabilities and where it may be uncertain, it may be realistic to be uncertain about the future, it's natural that there can be these uncertainties in what's going to be happening. What we need to think about is how that impacts ourselves and others as humans. Okay, and so the most successful leaders will be developing their human skills. And the three key areas that we can look at here is your emotional intelligence skills as a manager and a leader. How are you strategically adding value as a leader? And what critical thinking are you putting in place? Okay, and it's going to become even more important as we're using AI. Now, highest performing leaders are going to be focusing on these things amidst technological advancements rather than trying to be the one who has a lot of AI expertise in itself. Unless you want to become an AI expert and not a specific people manager anymore, and that's okay as well. If you want to be a people leader, then these are the things for you to think about and be focused on. So let's have a look at the first one, emotional intelligence and empathy. So what we're looking at here is we know that AI can analyze data, a lot of data, right? Well, what it can't do is read a human connection. It sometimes uses words that sound like got to do with human emotion. One of the things that's come up is, for example, heartfelt, where it's saying that's heartfelt in the way that you're explaining that. Another one that I get is that's a great idea or good thinking. Well done, Michael, for bringing that up. Yes, that's an excellent path to think about. What can happen here is that I got actually annoyed with some of the AI, and I've had this feedback from others, is that it puts these sort of words into places where it doesn't really fit, or it repeats the same thing over and over again. So it doesn't feel like it's human or it's genuine. And that's because AI is just repeating back something that's analyzed and sent back to you. Okay. It doesn't really know how to read what's happening in the room. It doesn't know what our facial emotions are, whether things are real, sarcastic, said with empathy. And so that's where you have an advantage as a leader to build this human connection. So what we want to be able to do is build on that and really understand things like what's happening for your team members around AI. Some of them may be excited, some of them may be anxious. How are you getting to know what's actually happening for your team members around this, and how are you going to be working through this? Another key part to look at is how have you gone about developing your own emotional intelligence? What are the skills that you've been working on? Do you understand the key fundamentals for emotional intelligence, which is about self-awareness about your own emotions, about noticing about what happens with other people and their emotions and reading them. It's about managing our own emotions. It's about being able to influence others in terms of what's happening with their emotions. Okay, and it's about being able to recognize and talk about and bring emotions into the context of what we're talking about, because we all have them as humans. We can't pretend that we don't have them. So how are you developing your emotional intelligence skills for yourself and for reading others? And think about this. If you think about the best leaders that you've ever had, the ones that where you really connected with them, where it felt like you had a great team or you were performing really well, you enjoyed being part of the group. Thinking about what was happening with the leader, chances are, most people tell me it's about how that leader made you feel. And it was about being seen, being trusted, being believed in, and shown that you are capable. And these are things that human beings do as part of our interactions that AI can't do. And the key foundation of that is trust. So if you really work on building a foundation of connected trust, then you're well on the way to developing these skills. Okay. So it's about focusing on these rather than focusing on AI technology itself. We'll come back to a few more of those points soon. Right, so we also want to be thinking about strategic value. And this is where, as humans, we can have an overview, a different sense of what's happening rather than just relying on AI. Yes, we can still use AI as all part of this. We want another layer over the top with looking at strategic thinking as a first part and making sure that we are truly in alignment with purpose and key objectives. Right? And at the moment, the way that AI works, it may or may not be able to identify this. And so we need to be able to make sure that we're connecting with what are the things that we're working on and how are we aligned with purpose and key objectives, which means we've got to take a step back out of the day-to-day and make sure that we're stopping, looking at the big picture and reflecting rather than getting caught up in the day-to-day. What we also want to be able to do is consider how we're looking at AI in terms of creating a strategic advantage. So what we're seeing today very much is that AI is being used in different ways, in different parts of the organisation, potentially maybe as a way of creating more productivity. At the moment, it's bits and pieces all over the place. Some people in organisations are using it every day, which is actually a surprising small percentage of under 20%, according to the latest Gallup research. Other people are hardly using it all. Other people are getting confused about what's the best way to use it. People are using all different models, including some that they've been told not to use within organisations. So it's a bit all over the place at the moment. So the opportunity for us as leaders is to start to think about how does AI get used as a strategic advantage within our organisation, within the team in what you're doing, all right? Rather than just starting to punch a whole bunch of things into AI and see what comes up, it's stepping back and think about how can we do some things differently or create an advantage. And also helping people work through this as a challenge and reframing it to opportunities. For those of us, also helping people work through this as a challenge and reframing it to opportunities. For those of us who've been around for a little while, we've seen some different challenges and changes over the years. And if we look back over hundreds of years, there's been versions of this type of change that's happened. And if we go back, one of the things that we can look at as an example of a story is when we first really transitioned to having a lot of personal computers in the workplace and at homes. Before we had these small computers like we're using now that everyone can get for themselves, we had no computers, or then we occasionally had the large computers. And we had a lot of people doing manual calculations, for example, manually adding things up to do with accounting and finance, for example. Now we've had a huge transition where a lot of all that is now being done by computers. Right? So this happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. A lot of jobs where people were literally calculating things, and some of them, if we go back far enough, their titles were calculators as people, that moved on to computers. Well, we're seeing another version of that now with AI. We got through the last one, and we will work through this one. Some things will change, some roles will not be there in the same way, but there will be new roles and new opportunities. And so you have you have as a leader an opportunity to help people to see that and redirect how they're seeing the challenges. And just be curious, which again means that as leaders we need to be able to stand back and say, what else is going on? What else is possible? What else should we be considering? All right? And not assuming that if we're using AI that it's giving us all the answers or all the right answers. And considering as part of this, what's the impact on the people? And this is where it crosses over with the emotional intelligence. So how are people reacting to the current situation? And with different styles and work styles and personalities, different people will respond in different ways. So part of the role of being an effective and high-performing leader is recognizing the different impact that this change is having on different people with different styles, And how do you connect and help them through this? So, stepping back, thinking strategically and looking to add value. And then connecting people with the buy-in so that they're open to working with you rather than resisting you as you're going along. Okay. And then the next key skill to be developing is critical thinking. Right. As we're using AI more and more within our organisations, and as I said earlier, it's a bit of a mishmash in the way that people are using it at the moment. So we need to ask ourselves these sorts of questions and critically think through what we're getting as using AI as part of our approach. So what are we missing? This is the leadership overview that we need to be guiding people as leaders, as managers, doing it ourselves and guiding people to be thinking this way. What are we missing? Okay, what's not there? What's the evidence? I'm sure many of you have probably heard of what happened last year when there was a report commissioned by the Victorian government. Deloitte provided that report, used AI extensively, and then it was found that there were many made up references, literally made up and added into the document and as footnotes that were totally fictitious. It wasn't checked properly and it was passed through to the government. So just one example. Yes, it shouldn't have been done, but it's an example of what we need to be doing here when we're critically evaluating what we're doing and how we're using AI. And in thinking about, is this right ethically? Again, there's been many examples that has been shown through the media where AI, with using its way of analysis, just depending on what data it's using, can suggest unethical ways forward. So we've got to, sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes we've got to slow down and really think about how does this fit into what we are about as an organisation, as a team? What are the possible biases? For example, in using AI in recruitment, it's been clearly shown that if it's used based on past recruitment processes where humans have certain biases, then those biases can come through in terms of how the AI are analysing things. And we certainly do have biases when it comes to recruitment, some that we know, some that are unconscious. So just because we're using AI doesn't mean that those things go away. In fact, they can be in there, but a little bit more hidden. So we've got to go looking for them. And then does this match our values? Okay. So again, what we're looking at here is another version of leadership skills where it asks you to step back and take a bigger picture look. And they're the things between human connection and stepping back and seeing things from a higher perspective. That are the skills that are going to be very valuable going forward. Okay. It's not about being the expert in AI. It's not about being the expert of figuring out how AI can be used in what your team members are doing. It's about human connection and bigger picture thinking. That is where the real value add is going to come from a leadership perspective. Okay. So, just connecting that. Here's what most managers do on a day-to-day basis right at the moment. This is what they're telling me. Hundreds and hundreds of managers over many years consistently. They prefer not to do these things. That this is the type of thing that people are getting caught up in. And again, you can tell me if this is what's happening for you. Send it through. So do your managers step in to protect the team from not such a great outcome, from failure by fixing a situation, improving their work, taking that report and polishing it up so that when you present it up the line, it's a much better report than your team members did. Sounds like the right thing to do, right? Okay, well, let's get to that in a moment. Do you as managers, your team, your other managers in your organisation, do you give quick answers to all the questions that your team members are asking? I used to do this all of the time in those first sort of 5, 6, 7 years. I thought it was the right thing to do. Keep things moving. Just give them all the answers that they want. Is that the right thing to do? And managers tell people exactly what to do. Again, the team comes to them, or as you're explaining tasks, step by step, little detail by little detail, you're outlining exactly what they need to do. These all seem like the right things to do. Okay, it seems logical that we should do these, and actually we need to stop. because these are the sorts of approaches that will make you more vulnerable to AI and actually leads to overwhelm and burnout. Okay. And if you're doing some of these things, then if you're like the managers that I'm working with at the moment, it means that AI has become part of this. You're trying to figure out how AI should be utilized within the work that your team is doing. But you become more vulnerable to AI if you're getting down into the detail of the work that your team members are doing and you're actually fixing that for them, because it means that you're not leaving yourself the time to create fully engaged workers who are high performing and add that strategic value. And the more that you're down in the operational level and down in the weeds, the more that AI has the potential to do some of that work. Okay, and that's why it's possible to be vulnerable. Another example I mentioned earlier is that AI can send out rote words saying, talking in emotional words. Oh yes, that's a heartfelt way of saying it, or great idea, Michael, or Michael, you're thinking brilliantly, that's on the right track. But when it's repeated, it can come across a way that it's not genuine. We can pick that up often in the way that AI is trying to connect with us. Well, actually, the same thing happens with humans. If you're just spreading out some words that you've heard before that doesn't mean anything and repeating the same thing, such as, yeah, good work, Michael. Thank you for your work. Keep that up. If you just repeat that over and over, well, that becomes also potentially non-genuine, and it can be seen in the same way as AI. So it's about how do you make sure that you're doing things differently from what AI can do. And true human connection takes you really listening and being involved and connected and genuinely caring about people so they can see that. Now, AI can't do that. So, in summary, what do high-performing leaders need to do? Display their emotional intelligence skills, okay, and develop those skills so that you're building that really strong, high-level human connection that AI can't do. And building trust is a big level of that foundation, okay, and connecting with people and reading body language, facial expressions, understanding different tone, different contexts, which AI just can't do. It's about trusting. Through trusting is empowering your team members so that you're helping them develop and grow, that things are being achieved through them and showing you believe in them and you see that they are capable. And that's when you increase engagement. Okay. So then you need to stop getting down into the weeds, stop doing their work for them or fixing things to bring it up to standard or telling them what to do. It's about helping them to come up to the standard that's required through that empowerment. Okay. And it's about using the leadership tools that are proven. Right? There's many tools out there. It's about getting help from your organization or from the right places where you get proven leadership tools instead of having to try and figure all of this out by trial and error on your own and trying to develop on the go. Use what's already been proven to work. So, just before we get into some opportunity for some questions, what you need to think about moving forward is, do you want to try and do all of this yourself? And what will it cost you if you don't change, right? If you don't get on top of things? Is it burnout? Is it insecurity about your role? Is it slow career progression? This overwhelm just keeps continuing if you take on all of the burden yourself. Or you could think about getting some help, getting some expert help to really fast track how you can put this in place and turn yourself into a high-performing leader who has consistently high confidence, has a high-performing, highly engaged team working through the transition with AI, okay, and has multiple career options. I mean, what would it be worth to you? Maybe you're like my clients who say that it's worth so much. Many describe it as invaluable, can't even put a value on it for how they feel in terms of their well-being, their connection with their family, their confidence. Even though many of them have had thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of increases in their salary or bonuses. Most of them talk about their sense of well-being and confidence and balance. Here's just a couple of examples. I won't read through all of these. I'll just give you 30 seconds to have a quick read through a couple, and then we'll go to some questions. It's a little bit from Alex, and then there's Jude. Both of which created better balance, less working hours, and yet they got promoted and earned more. So jump in with some questions now, or you can take down my email address there and shoot me through some questions. And I look forward to seeing you again on another Leadership Masterclass very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.